There are nights when the world feels slightly off, as if the air itself is holding its breath. Nights when the wind seems to listen, when the shadows hesitate before settling into place. This story begins on one of those nights, in a small coastal village in the Philippines, where tradition and superstition thread quietly through everyday life. For most people, the village looked peaceful. Warm lanterns glowing in wooden windows, fishermen repairing their nets by the shore, children running barefoot along dusty paths. But for Alina, the village midwife, the peace was never enough to silence the things she knew. Decades of helping mothers bring life into the world had taught her that birth attracts more than joy. It attracts attention, it attracts hunger. Alina had long believed that some creatures did not simply belong to myths. She had never seen one herself, but she had heard enough. Soft noises on rooftops during difficult deliveries, strange scratches near windows, murmured warnings from elders who refused to be outside after dusk. And on this particular night, as she prepared her herbal mixtures and washed her hands in a small clay basin, she felt the same unease creeping back. It clung to her shoulders like a weight. The message had arrived hours earlier. A young woman named Mara was in labor, sooner than expected. The family was frightened, not because the birth seemed dangerous, but because the timing was wrong. New moons were considered unlucky for childbirth, and even the skeptics of the village admitted that strange things tended to happen when the sky was its darkest. Still, Alina approached the house with steady steps. She carried her worn leather satchel and a small lantern whose flame swayed nervously in the wind. The sky above was clouded, moonless, and heavy. Even the dogs that usually barked at strangers were silent, as if sensing something they could neither fight nor flee. When Alina entered the house, she was greeted by whispers. Mara's mother wrung her hands anxiously, and Mara's husband kept glancing at the windows, despite the shutters being tightly closed. The atmosphere inside felt thick, as though the air had been squeezed into the corners. Alina placed her satchel on the table and immediately felt it, the subtle tremor in the wooden floorboards, as if a faint vibration hummed through the house. She looked up. No one else seemed to notice. "It's just nerves," she whispered to herself, though she didn't quite believe it. She moved to Mara's side, checked her pulse, murmured soft reassurances. The contractions were strong, but manageable. Everything should have felt normal. Yet something pressed on her mind like a persistent knock. Then, when the wind shifted outside, brushing against the walls with a low, sliding sound, Alina's heart tightened. It was a sound she had heard only twice in her life, a sound the elders once described as a warning, a sound that meant something was searching. She kept her voice calm as she asked for warm water and cloths, but inside her chest, her heartbeat echoed like a drum. The shutters rattled again, lightly, gently, almost inquisitively, as if touched by a curious hand. And in that moment, Alina knew two things with certainty. Tonight's birth would be difficult, and they were not alone. The lantern light inside the small house flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. Alina worked quietly, preparing Mara for the hours ahead, all while her ears stayed alert to the world outside. Every sound mattered now, every rustle of wind, every shift of wood. When the air grows too quiet, that is when danger travels easiest, an old saying she wished she didn't remember tonight. Mara breathed heavily but steadily, gripping her husband's hand. He tried to appear strong, though his eyes kept drifting toward the ceiling. Alina noticed it each time. Fear has a way of guiding the gaze. Outside, the night deepened. The villagers had long since shut their doors and darkened their lamps. It wasn't that anyone expected trouble. Most refused to believe in such things, but tradition taught caution, and caution often came disguised as silence. Yet even with all doors closed, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting just beyond the walls. She moved to the window, checking the shutters. They were secured with a wooden bar, but she pushed against them anyway, testing, just to be sure. The wind responded with a faint sigh. Mara's mother approached her in a whisper. "Do you feel it too? The air outside. It hasn't been right all night." Alina didn't answer immediately. She didn't want to alarm the family, but honesty had always been part of her work. Midwives did not just guide life, they protected it. "There are nights," she said softly, "when certain things wander closer than they should. But panic helps no one. Stay calm, stay inside." Before the woman could reply, a subtle sound drifted from above, so soft that it could have been imagined, a faint, light scraping noise, like fingertips brushing along the thatched roof. Mara's husband froze. "Did you hear that?" Alina lifted a hand to quiet him. She strained her ears, waiting. For a moment, nothing happened. Then it came again, a delicate but deliberate motion, moving slowly from one side of the roof to the other. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Not the wind, not an animal. Too controlled, too curious. The room grew colder as everyone realized they were listening to the same thing. Mara whimpered, more from fear than pain. Alina rushed to her side, speaking with calm authority. "Focus on your breathing. Whatever is outside cannot enter unless we give it reason to." The words were meant to soothe, yet even she felt a tremor in her voice. Another sound followed, this time near the window. A soft tap, like knuckles gently testing the wood. Mara's mother covered her mouth and her husband stepped forward as if to defend the house, though he had nothing but trembling hands to offer. Alina stepped between him and the window. Her pulse beat fast, but she kept her expression steady. "Stay together. No sudden movements. These things are drawn to distress." For a moment, everything went silent again. The kind of silence that presses against the ears until it becomes a sound of its own. Alina knew this pattern: approach, retreat, listen. Whatever was outside was intelligent enough to be patient. Then, from the rooftop, a soft rustling, accompanied by the flutter of something moving in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Wings, but not like any bird she had ever heard. The sound was too heavy, too steady, as if each movement carried intention rather than instinct. Alina felt her breath catch. "Not tonight. Please. Not tonight." Mara gasped with another contraction, pulling everyone's attention back to her. The sound outside paused, as though listening. That was what frightened Alina the most, because whatever it was, it understood the meaning of those cries. The next contraction struck Mara harder than the last, and she clutched the blankets beneath her with desperate strength. The house seemed to shrink with every passing minute, the air thickening as if reacting to the tension filling the room. Alina leaned close, guiding Mara's breathing, keeping her focused on rhythm and calm. But beneath her reassuring words, her mind raced. Outside, the fluttering had stopped. That was worse. Creatures driven by instinct made noise. Creatures driven by intent made silence. Mara's husband paced near the doorway, unsure whether to help or to hide. His eyes darted to the small gaps between the wooden slats of the wall, as if afraid a gaze might be staring back. Mara's mother whispered prayers under her breath, clutching a woven charm meant to ward off misfortune. Alina didn't blame her. Tonight, every tradition felt like a lifeline. Another faint sound broke through the tension, a soft, almost polite tapping against the back wall of the house. 4 taps, evenly spaced, then stillness. Alina's skin prickled. That pattern wasn't random. Mara whimpered again. Alina gently wiped sweat from her forehead and forced her voice to remain steady. "You're doing well. Just focus on what you can control. The rest, let me worry about it." But the tapping returned, closer this time, on the far side of the window shutters. Not loud, not aggressive, just testing, as though something outside was patiently mapping the house, searching for a weakness. Mara's husband stepped backward, bumping into a wooden beam. "It's circling," he whispered. Alina nodded once. "I know." The lantern in the center of the room flickered, dimming for just a second. All eyes turned toward it. Mara's mother gasped. "It knows there is a birth," she whispered, voice trembling. "It waits for the moment." "Do not finish that sentence," Alina said firmly, though her heart echoed the same fear. She approached the window again, not to open it, never that, but to listen. Beyond the wooden shutters, the wind had shifted once more. It carried something faint, something she didn't want to acknowledge at first. Not a voice, not exactly. More like a breath exhaled too slowly, too deliberately. A whisper without words. Alina pressed her palm against the shutter, as if she could feel the night pressing back. The wood felt cold, colder than it should have been. And beneath the chill, a sense of proximity, a presence waiting only inches away. She forced herself to step back. "Everyone stay away from the walls," she warned softly. "These things respond to movement." Mara's husband guided his mother-in-law toward the center of the room while Alina returned to the bedside. Mara's contractions were growing stronger, faster. The timing frightened her, not because the birth was progressing too quickly, but because the sounds outside matched the rising intensity of the labor, as if the creature recognized the pattern. Another whisper brushed across the wall, closer, clearer. Mara whimpered, gripping Alina's arm. Is it after me?" Alina hesitated. She didn't want to lie, but fear could make labor dangerous. "It's after opportunity," she said gently, "and we are not giving it any." Outside, something shifted on the roof again. Just a small sound, like weight settling against straw. But this time it didn't move away. It stayed, listening, waiting. And in that long, quiet moment, Alina understood what the elders had tried to warn her many years ago. Some creatures don't hunt with teeth or claws, they hunt with patience. And tonight, patience was already perched above them. The night outside had settled into an unnatural stillness, as if the world beyond the walls were holding itself motionless. The only movement came from inside the house, Mara's strained breaths, the creak of wooden floorboards beneath anxious steps, and the quiet rustling of cloth as Alina worked with deliberate care. Yet all of it felt overshadowed by the presence above them, crouched somewhere on the roof like a question waiting to be answered. Alina kept her hands steady. Fear was allowed to sit in the room, but it was not allowed to guide her. Not tonight. The lantern on the table glowed softly, its light warm against the cool shadows. It was a small comfort, a fragile barrier between them and the darkness. But as Mara groaned through another contraction, something happened that made Alina's breath hitch. The flame wavered, once, twice, then dimmed to a trembling faint glow. There was no draft, no open window, no movement near the lantern at all. Mara's husband froze mid-step. "That wasn't the wind," he whispered. Alina agreed, but she didn't say it aloud. Instead, she rose and approached the lantern, shielding the flame with her hand as if protecting it from an invisible force. The warmth was still there, but weaker, as though the room itself were draining its strength. Behind her, a soft sound drifted from the rooftop again. Not scraping this time. Something slower, heavier. A deliberate shifting, as though the creature had adjusted its position to peer downward, listening not to noise, but to life. Mara's mother began to pray again, the words shaking as they left her lips. Alina turned to her gently. "Keep your voice low. Calm helps more than fear right now." Calm. The words seemed almost absurd inside this tightening space, but she repeated it in her mind like a shield. She returned to Mara's side, noting how the contractions were coming dangerously fast now. The labor was reaching its peak, and Alina knew that the moment of birth, normally a blessing, was exactly what the creature outside had been waiting for. A new sound emerged from the far end of the house, a soft sliding noise, subtle enough to dismiss at first. But then it came again, and again. Not at the roof this time. At the wall, near the floor. Something was tracing along the outside of the house. Mara's husband backed away quickly. "It's not just on the roof anymore." Alina stepped forward, placing herself between the wall and everyone else. She closed her eyes briefly and listened. The sliding sound was faint but unmistakable, like fingertips brushing along wood, searching for a gap or a weakness. A chill ran along the floorboards beneath her feet. Then, as if responding to her awareness, the sound stopped. A heartbeat of silence. 2 heartbeats. And then, tap. A gentle touch against the lowest plank of the wall, right where the floor met the wood. Tap. A second touch, slightly firmer. Alina's jaw tightened. It was mapping the edges of the house again. Testing. But why the floor, unless... Her thoughts were interrupted by Mara's sharp cry. The labor had reached a critical moment. The room shifted from tense anticipation to urgent focus. Alina rushed to her side, instinct overriding fear. "Mara, listen to me," she said, voice steady but urgent. "This is the moment you need to stay centered. Do not let any sound distract you. Look only at me." Mara nodded, tears streaming down her temples. Outside, another whisper brushed against the wall, so close it felt like a breath seeping through the wood. Alina lifted her chin, staring at the shuttered window, knowing the creature was inches beyond it. "You will not have this child," she whispered under her breath. Not to Mara, not to the family, but to whatever listened outside. And for the first time all night, the house answered. The lantern flickered violently, then flared brighter, steadying itself without explanation, bathing the entire room in warm, defiant light. Everyone stared at it in stunned silence. For just a moment, it felt like something in the room pushed back. But outside, something began to scratch again, slow, persistent, closer than ever, and Alina realized the night was far from over. The air inside the house had grown so still that even breathing seemed to disturb it. The lantern's sudden surge of brightness had given everyone a flicker of hope, but the scratch that followed, slow and deliberate, pressed that hope back into silence. It moved along the wall like a question the night was asking, one that no one dared to answer. Mara was deep in labor now, each contraction carving the minutes into sharper urgency. Her hands trembled as she held on to Alina's, her eyes searching for reassurance. Alina gave it to her with a calm expression she didn't truly feel. But midwives learn to hold 2 truths at once, the fear inside and the strength outside. "You're almost there," Alina murmured. "Just stay with me. Breathe with me." Mara nodded, though her breaths came tight and shallow. Outside, the scratching stopped. Not because the creature had retreated, Alina sensed that instantly, but because it was listening again. The quiet was too pointed, too tense, as though something pressed its ear to the wall, absorbing every sound inside. Then the roof creaked, a single shift of weight, not movement, just settling, like a presence lowering itself closer. Mara's husband looked up, dread widening his eyes. "It's directly above her," Mara whimpered, and Alina turned sharply to him. "Do not say that again," she said firmly. "Fear feeds things like this." But even as she spoke, Alina felt the truth of his words sinking into the room like cold water. Another contraction seized Mara, stronger than the others. She cried out, not loudly, but enough to break the fragile silence. The response from the roof was immediate. A soft rustle, then a subtle thump, as though something shifted in anticipation. Alina steadied Mara's shoulders. "Listen to me," she said softly but with steel beneath the surface. "This child will be born safely. Nothing outside this house will touch you, not while I am here." Mara's mother reached out to help, her hands trembling. The older woman's woven charm brushed against Mara's arm, and for a moment, even if only superstition, the room felt just a little warmer. But then the lantern flickered again. Not violently this time, not in resistance, in warning. The flame narrowed to a thin thread of light, trembling in a way that told Alina the presence outside was no longer searching. It had found what it wanted. A faint sound drifted from just above the window, a soft, rhythmic tapping, almost like someone brushing long nails along the wood. The taps were spaced evenly, patient, intentional. Tap, tap, tap. A pause, tap. Alina's breath caught. She knew this pattern. Elders had spoken of it in hushed tones, the way hunters speak of tracks in the dirt. It was not a threat. It was a claim, The creature was announcing that it was waiting for the moment the new life entered the world. "No," Alina whispered under her breath. "Not tonight." She moved quickly, retrieving a bowl of warm water and dipping a clean cloth into it. Her movements were purposeful now, not just practical, but protective. Mothers often spoke of midwives as guardians, though Alina had never liked the title. Tonight, though, she felt it settling onto her shoulders like a cloak she had no choice but to wear. The floor creaked beneath Mara's bed, just once, but the sound traveled through the room like a cold breeze. Mara's husband stepped closer. "Did something just move?" "It's the wood settling," Alina interrupted. "Nothing more." But she knew better. The weight on the roof had shifted again, aligning directly above the rear corner of the house. The creature was positioning itself, preparing. She could sense its focus narrowing, its attention tightening like a coil, and then, from somewhere outside, near the ground this time, a whisper, not a voice, not words, but a breath that felt too intentional to be the wind. As Mara let out another cry, the sound outside paused again, as though savoring the moment. Alina leaned close, her voice firm and low. "This is the final stretch, the moment you stay strong, no matter what you hear." Mara nodded, tears streaking her face, fear and determination intertwined. The lantern held steady, glowing like a lone guardian in the dim room. But beyond the walls, the night leaned closer still. And Alina knew the creature was waiting for exactly one thing: the instant when new life broke through the silence. The moment when the barrier between worlds felt thin. The moment when hunger sharpened. And that moment was coming now. The night had reached its deepest hour, the point where even the wind seemed unwilling to move. Inside the small house, the lantern glowed with a steady, determined warmth, as if it understood that its light was now a final line of defense. Mara gripped the blankets beneath her with trembling hands, breaths quick but focused. Alina knelt beside her, steady and resolute, aware that every second mattered. Outside, the creature had gone silent again. Not retreating, just waiting. The quiet pressed against the house like a heavy curtain, wrapping around the walls, the floor, the roof. Even the insects had stopped chirping. It felt as if the entire world was listening for one sound, the first cry of a newborn. Mara's husband stood near Alina, torn between fear and the instinct to protect. Mara's mother hovered behind him, whispering soft, wavering prayers into her clasped hands. But Alina's attention was fixed entirely on Mara. "You're almost there," she said softly, but with the full weight of authority. "When your body tells you it's time, you follow it. Do not worry about anything else." Mara nodded, eyes squeezed shut. Another contraction surged through her, stronger than all the others. Her cry rose, not loud, but sharp enough to pierce the stillness. And outside, directly above the roof, something responded. A faint shifting, the gentle rasp of movement, the sense that something leaned forward, listening. Alina's heartbeat drummed in her ears, but she did not look away from Mara. Fear would not guide her hands, only purpose. One more moment, one more breath, and then a small, fragile cry filled the room. Soft at first, then growing stronger, like a spark taking form in darkness. The exact sound the night had been waiting for. The roof reacted immediately. Another shift of weight, this one unmistakably eager. The wooden beams creaked as though pressed from above. A soft, deliberate scratch moved along the roofline, inching toward the window, toward the source of the cry. But Alina was ready. She wrapped the newborn in warm cloth, moving with precision and calm. She held the child close to her chest, keeping her body between the baby and the nearest window. The lantern light flared slightly, catching the child's face, bathing it in gold. Mara sobbed with relief, reaching weakly for her child. Is the baby safe?" "Yes," Alina said firmly. "Safe and strong." But her eyes flicked to the window, just once. Outside, A faint thud pressed against the wooden shutter, gentle, almost expectant, as if something had leaned in for a better look. The baby cried again, and the shutter trembled. Alina stepped forward quickly, distancing the child from the wall. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "You will not enter this house." It was not a threat. It was a declaration. Unseen beyond the shutter, something shifted, a soft rustle, a faint exhale that did not belong to wind, and then nothing. The presence began to recede, slowly at first, then with growing distance. The scratching faded, the tapping stopped. Even the strange chill along the floorboards lifted. It took nearly a full minute before the silence felt like real silence again. Mara's husband let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Mara's mother collapsed into a chair, tears of relief streaming down her face. Mara, exhausted but smiling, reached again for her child. Alina placed the newborn gently into her arms. Outside, the night remained dark, but its weight had lifted. For now. As Alina gathered her supplies, she paused near the window. She did not open the shutters, she never would at this hour, but she rested her hand against the wood. It felt warm again, as if whatever cold presence had been there had fully retreated. Still, she spoke softly, not as a warning, but as acknowledgement. "This child is not yours, and no child in my care ever will be." The wind picked up then, rustling the trees outside for the first time in hours, a natural sound, a welcome one. Alina turned back to the family, offering them a calm, steady smile. "Tonight is over," she said. "Rest now. When the sun rises, this house will know peace again." And although she did not speak it aloud, she knew the truth that would stay with her long after dawn. There are nights when the world leans closer, when old things remember old hungers. And there are people who stand between that darkness and the innocent, people like her. Tonight she had stood firm, and tonight, that had been enough.